In 2024, the global esports industry pulled in over $2 billion. Millions tuned in to watch world championships that filled stadiums once reserved for football. Brands like Red Bull, Monster, Gucci, and Mercedes-Benz are spending millions to get their logos on gamer jerseys, Twitch streams, and trophy stages. But there's one brand that's missing. Rolex, the most recognized luxury watchmaker in the world, is nowhere to be found. No sponsorships, no tournaments, no collaborations. In an age where esports rivals the Super Bowl in viewership, why has Rolex stayed silent? To understand Rolex's absence, you first have to understand its philosophy. Rolex doesn't chase attention, it creates presence. The brand is built on association with timeless, disciplined excellence, not digital fuss. When you see the crown at Wimbledon, at Le Mans, or at the Masters, it's never surrounded by neon lights or loud sponsorship tags. It's quietly placed where time and mastery means something tangible. Every Rolex partnership reinforces the same image: heritage, achievement, and endurance. Esports, on the other hand, runs on a completely different operating system. It's young, volatile, and loud. Its audience is fueled by memes, caffeine, and competition that resets every few months. A single game patch can flip an entire competitive scene. That volatility is great for engagement, but terrible for a brand like Rolex that sells permanence. Also, the average Rolex buyer is in their 40s or 50s. They've climbed the career ladder, reached stability, and now buy symbols of their success. The average esports fan is in their early 20s. They spend on digital skins, not Swiss watches. They value speed, instant gratification, and innovation. All the things Rolex deliberately distances itself from. Rolex's entire image depends on control. Its events are quiet, exclusive, and steeped in tradition. Esports is the opposite: unpredictable, democratized, and powered by community. When Rolex sponsors an event, it expects to own the aesthetic, the lighting, the messaging, even the tone of the broadcast. In an esports tournament, where live chat, commentary, and social media can spin narratives in real time, that level of control simply doesn't exist. And it's not that Rolex doesn't see opportunity. Esports has money, reach, and influence. But Rolex isn't in the business of reach. It's in the business of reputation. Every partnership they make is an investment in their mythology, not their metrics. That's why they're in tennis, golf, and motorsport. All sports defined by precision, patience, and performance under pressure. These are arenas where time is measured in milliseconds, and success is immortalized. Esports measures victory in clicks per second, patches per season, and memes per minute. For Rolex, that's not timeless. It's temporary. Still, the story isn't about snobbery. Rolex isn't avoiding esports because it's too new. It's avoiding it because the environment doesn't yet match its language of legacy. Every campaign, every sponsorship, every ambassador fits into a single storyline achievement. Their slogan, "A crown for every achievement," is less of a tagline and more of a business model. That's why Rolex lives in spaces where victory feels sacred. Tennis champions lift trophies in tailored suits. Golfers sink their final putt in silence. Race car drivers glance at their wrists before spraying champagne. These are moments that feel cinematic, historical, eternal. The exact emotional texture Rolex wants attached to its crown. Now imagine trying to recreate that in esports. The environment is completely different. A League of Legends world champion doesn't lift a trophy in a tuxedo. He's in team-branded sneakers under strobe lights, surrounded by pyrotechnics and confetti. The crowd screams, the chat explodes, the clip is memed before the trophy even cools. It's a victory, yes, but it's chaotic. And Rolex doesn't market through chaos, it markets through calm. The brand's aesthetic relies on silence, poise, and control. Their storytelling is built on patience, not hype, which means esports, at least right now, doesn't give them the right kind of canvas. Esports sponsorships are structured around visibility. The more screens, the better. Brands like Red Bull and Monster Energy thrive here because they're loud, kinetic, and youth-driven. They plaster logos across jerseys, streams, stage lights, and in-game ads. Their identity feeds off noise. But Rolex doesn't need more eyes. It needs the right eyes. Its value isn't how many people see the logo, but in what seeing it means. When you see it on a Formula One banner, it signifies mastery. If Rolex appears in esports today, surrounded by Mountain Dew, RGB lighting, and meme edits, that value of something precious would collapse. The crown only works when it looks out of reach. But that doesn't mean it'll never work. As the first generation of gamers ages up, earning, investing, and buying their first luxury items, Rolex might start to listen. The question isn't whether esports is big enough, it's whether it can ever feel timeless enough for Rolex to wear the crown on its stage. For Rolex to even consider esports, three things need to evolve: maturity, ceremony, and continuity. First, maturity. Not of the audience, but of the ecosystem. The current esports scene is fragmented across dozens of titles and publishers, each with its own tournaments, rules, and lifespans. Rolex partners with unified institutions, not transient moments. Wimbledon, the Masters, and Le Mans all share one thing: they existed before television and will outlive social media. For Rolex to move, an esports league would need to demonstrate the same consistency. A competition with a fixed format, physical venues, and a reputation spanning generations, not seasons. Second, the ceremony. Rolex's marketing relies on ritual, that slow, deliberate theater around victory. The trophy presentation, the hush before applause, the camera cutting to a wrist glinting in the light. Esports victories, while thrilling, lack that ceremonial weight. The emotion is there, but the structure isn't. For Rolex, the brand moment comes not from excitement, but from reverence. Until esports can produce a final scene that feels historic rather than hyperactive, the crown won't fit. Third, continuity. Rolex thrives in spaces that maintain their prestige for decades without collapsing under commercial noise. In esports, teams frequently rebrand, players retire at 25, and sponsors rotate faster than patches. That instability would cheapen Rolex's presence. The crown only shines when the stage beneath it doesn't wobble. But luxury isn't ignoring esports altogether, it's just sending scouts. Gucci's collaboration with Fanatics sold out in hours, but it was intentionally priced below their usual range. It wasn't about luxury, it was about access. Louis Vuitton designed a trophy case for League of Legends Worlds, but again, it was about visibility, not legacy. These were experiments, and definitely not commitments. They showed that luxury and gaming can coexist, but they also show the gap between hype and heritage. For Rolex, temporary buzz is a liability. It devalues the aura of timelessness. The company's marketing team doesn't think in campaigns, they think in decades. That's why Rolex's partnerships rarely change. They accumulate history. The irony is that esports is slowly building exactly what Rolex wants: stability. Franchise leagues like the LEC, LCS, and Overwatch League have permanent teams, media rights, and growing archives of memorable moments. As generations of players retire and return as coaches, the sport's history begins to write itself. When esports gains that sense of legacy, when a tournament can say it's on its 50th anniversary, not its 5th, Rolex will notice. The brand doesn't care about the size of the audience, it cares about the weight of the moment. And esports, for all its flash and noise, is slowly maturing into something Rolex might one day recognize: a discipline, not just a spectacle. For Rolex, not being everywhere is exactly the point. Scarcity is part of the brand's DNA. Every watch takes months to build, and every partnership is chosen like a lifelong investment. In luxury, silence speaks louder than exposure. Red Bull gains relevance by flooding the world with logos. Rolex earns reverence by knowing when to stay invisible. When a brand has spent a century building mystique around timelessness, even one misplaced collaboration can chip away at that illusion. Esports, for all its excitement, doesn't yet offer the kind of control or gravitas Rolex demands. A single awkward product placement, a chaotic broadcast moment, or a controversy involving a sponsored player could do more damage to the brand than a decade of silence ever could. So instead of joining the noise, Rolex chooses the long game. It invests in sports that reward patience and mastery, where time itself becomes the hero. Esports, however, thrives on disruption. Every few months, the rules change, the champions reset, and the clock starts again. Even without direct involvement, Rolex still benefits from esports' existence. Younger audiences introduced to luxury through brands like Gucci or LV are indirectly trained to appreciate craftsman and exclusivity, two things Rolex dominates. By the time those same gamers grow older and earn more, Rolex becomes the natural endgame purchase. In a way, the brand lets others do the cultural groundwork while it waits at the finish line. It's also worth noting that Rolex's non-profit ownership structure gives it freedom that most companies don't have. It doesn't need quarterly spikes or viral partnerships to satisfy shareholders. It can afford to prioritize legacy over metrics, depth over reach. That autonomy allows Rolex to operate like time itself, steady, unaffected, inevitable. Esports will continue to expand, professionalize, and attract more luxury brands. Eventually, a major tournament may evolve into a global institution, the kind that spans generations, where history and ritual replace flash and novelty. When that day comes, Rolex won't rush in with fanfare. It'll quietly appear, perhaps on the wrist of a champion, or engraved on a stage clock that counts down to immortality. Because Rolex doesn't need to enter esports to be relevant. It only needs to enter once, when the timing is perfect. Until then, the world's fastest growing sport will keep running on milliseconds, while Rolex keeps counting centuries. And that's precisely how the crown stays undefeated. But time has a funny way of changing everything. The same generation that grew up on consoles and keyboards is now entering the age of luxury. The question isn't if Rolex will ever enter esports, it's when, and what that moment will look like. So what do you think? Would a Rolex logo ever fit on an esports stage, or would that break everything the brand stands for? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because when it comes to Rolex and esports, the clock is still ticking.